Let's look at testing. So here are some things that the industry knows to be true. People who work in the industry, Ross knows this is true, Lee knows this is true, but sometimes people outside the industry might think, is this really true? First is that all software has defects. All software has defects. There is no software that I know of anywhere in the world that does not have defects. Enhancements often add defects. So doing something new often makes other things break. I wish some of these were not true. These are the pain in my life. I wish it wasn't the case. The typing's a little wrong there, but any system of complexity cannot be held fully in the mind. So as a developer, once a system reaches any reasonable amount of complexity, you actually cannot hold all of the details of that system in the mind. You will make a change and you do not know the full implications of all of those changes. And what often happens is we're working on something, and if it's like ripples in the pond, we can appreciate ripple 1 and ripple 2. We know what's the immediate things, but there will be implications of changes that will happen 4 and 5 ripples out that there was no way for a human to actually know that in their mind. Undetected defects get more expensive to fix over time. So this is actually true throughout the software development process, but let me give you an example. We're building a piece of software, let's say we're doing it for David, and there's a defect and he picks it up before it's released. Well, there's a cost involved in rectifying that. But imagine that that doesn't get picked up and instead it gets picked up a month after it's released. Well, there could be cost in terms of reputational issues and other bits and pieces, but just the straight cost of development will generally be higher. And the reason is you often have to fix the data that was wrong along with the code. Does that make sense? So there's two parts to that. So the sooner that we can get to defects, we actually reduce the cost of those defects. Testing and code reviews are our best defense. There are actually other ways to avoid defects in software, but they actually are just too cost consuming. You actually don't do them. You can do mathematical proofs of software and other bits and pieces, but really it comes down to testing and code reviews are the best defense that we have. So we need testing. Let's have a little look at who can test. We've got really 4 key aspects of who can test. We can have the developer who can test their work, and developers should test their work. But developers, the typical life of a developer is they want to work, they will often put their head down and put headphones on and not talk to anyone for 2 to 3 hours in our office. And that's why we kind of buffer with phone call interruptions, because each interruption actually screws them up for like 20 minutes. They get in their zone and they are thinking about that thing really hard. And what happens is when they come to test, they're so focused on that bit there, it's actually hard to think outside the implications of that. And so we could have someone in our organisation who is testing, who is not the developer. And historically that's been a project manager. We've more recently brought in professional testing to help with that. Clients can test. You'll hear a thing called UAT, which stands for user acceptance testing. So there's 2 sorts of testing that clients can do. There's testing which is just does it work, and there's testing which is did I get what I paid for? Did I get the thing that I agreed to buy? And the last one is that we can do automated computer-based testing. So this is where we get a piece of software to do the testing for us. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So automated testing, let me just explain how that works. It looks really freaky when you see it. Imagine that I've got your web page and I've got a little bit of software and I click a button and all of a sudden, without touching anything else, it opens up, I put a login detail in, it goes to the next page, it clicks on this, it opens that thing up, it does this, it does this, it does this, it does this. And the system is actually set up to run all of those key interactions and look for standardized outputs. It's actually expecting a certain set of outcomes. That is what automated testing looks like. And that's called end-to-end automated testing. There's actually a different sort which is called unit testing. And that's where you just test a specific and smaller piece of logic on a particular piece. So we've got end-to-end testing and we've got unit testing. And end-to-end testing is a really good way to get coverage that something is working. Let's have a look at some of the pros and the cons. Pros is that it's fast. Sometimes these tests, we've got suites that can actually take an hour to run, but I don't care if something takes an hour to run if a machine is doing it, because I can go on and do something else. So they don't take much human time. They give us high reliability. So human testers are still human, they can make mistakes, whereas computers are effectively, they run reliably. Something that higher end development firms do, and something that we've introduced recently, is they can become part of your deployment. So what this means is, one of the problems with automated tests is this is a common scenario. I create them, I do something else, and I break them, and I'll talk about how automated tests break, but the client's on the phone, so I've got to get it out the door quickly, and I do it. What you can do is you can actually make it part of the process by which you save and deploy your code. You can actually have these tests run without just run without somebody's choice, so it can actually force some discipline that way. Let me give you some of the cons. Firstly, they cost money. They have a high upfront cost, and they slow the initial development. Let's talk about some of the implications of that. Earlier today, we talked about wanting to get things to market quickly, getting MVPs out the door. We want to test stuff quickly. And so we have this tension between, hey, we'd love to do automated testing because of the quality that it gives us, but it slows us down and it has an upfront investment, and anyone who says it doesn't is wrong. And we live in this tension between automated testing and what it gives us with the time that it takes. And particularly, automated tests are costly to maintain in the face of rapid change. So when your interfaces change a bit, say you've got a 5-step process and you work on step 3 and you've got a whole bunch of end-to-end tests, they all broke. You had to go and fix them all up because that intermediary page changed. And so we have a challenge around that, and I've got some suggestions that I'll get to in just a moment on that. I want to give you an example. NASA. This is deciding, do I go down the automated testing route? NASA is by many considered the world's most reliable software system. They have something like 400,000 lines of code. That's big. There's a lot of code there. And they have only found 3 post-testing bugs over all the time that it's been written. That is the extreme end of quality. But their code took something like 20 to 50 times the normal budget to write. But they live in a space where it's okay to spend $1 billion making sure your code's right, because if a shuttle blows up, it's worth something between $2 to $8 billion. The actual payback is completely acceptable in their space. Let's compare that to an online system. So I've got a business that does $1,000 a day online. It costs me $10,000 to set up the test suite, and my payback, I need that system, assuming that $1,000 a day is pure margin, like there's no cost in that. Sometimes there's cost in business as well, but assume it's pure margin. My system needs to be down for 10 days. We'd notice that generally. It needs to be down for 10 days to get that payback in pure economic terms. Now, there are other factors at play, reputational loss, a whole bunch of other bits and pieces, but in some cases where I'm doing something that's a bit cheap and cheerful to test a market, to get something out as an early version, the economics of it just don't stack up, and we've had that wrestle internally. So one of the other things you can do is just use good monitoring to tell you about problems and just fix them when they happen. It can sometimes be a better solution. So key factors to consider: is your platform likely to change? This is actually the big thing for me. What is the issue of reputational loss? How quickly do we need to get to the market? So our speed to market. And what is our cost over time? If I was waving a magic wand, this is what testing would look like. We'd do some MVP stuff. We may or may not do automated tests at that point. Once we felt the business had stabilised, we'd actually make the investment in tests at a stable point, and that investment in tests would pay off in terms of reduced defects, improved quality, and we would get the benefit of it back. The problem is it can be a hard sell with a client to say, okay, now your business is finally stable, you're finally actually starting to make some money. Hey, let's make another investment and do a chunk of automated testing. One of the things that we have done is invested internally in terms of our testing resources, and there are a number of our long-term clients that I'd love to have a conversation with that says, okay, let's do a deal. Do you know what I mean? We've done a bunch of work, we've got your business stable, let's do something so that we can get this suite of tests up and running. And if we need to do a deal for that, let's do that, and then we can roll that forward further. And I think that'd be a great conversation that might come out of today. Test coverage. One other thing, and this is going to sound like bad news, is automated tests. It's a little bit of an 80-20 scenario. So the 80-20 rule says that 80% of the benefit comes from 20% of the activities. When we're doing automated tests, we typically actually don't want to pay for test coverage of everything. We actually want to pay for test coverage of the key activities that are going to really drive our business. And then if we get a bug that comes up, we'll add a test case so that we resolve the bug and we put a test case in specifically to deal with that bug. So there can be this crazy thing that you've invested in automated testing and you can still get obscure things around the edges. And yes, you can, but it does actually, overall, you decrease your defect rate. And the other factor is the client's willingness to human test. And there's people in the room who've said, no, I don't want to do automated testing, I'll do human testing. And that's an economic decision that they've made and I can totally understand from a given situation. So what do we actually do? So we obviously have two of our own startup businesses, for those of you who didn't know, and we use automated testing on the important stable bits of the software. So that's what we do. So we'd love to chat to you about if that's something, I'd love that to be a conversation that came out, and maybe not today, but in following weeks with people in the room if that